Oh, great. I can't see you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today. Before we get started, I can't see you, but I do want you to raise your hand if you've ever made a mistake that made you want to just crawl in a hole and hide for the rest of your life. I certainly have made my fair share of mistakes. In fact, on my career journey, I have faced fear, failure, and embarrassment. But what if I told you that your mistakes can become really powerful learning opportunities? That's right. If you could just learn how to get comfortable in the uncomfortableness of making mistakes, you will become the person that you want to be in every aspect of your life. Stick with me, and by the end of this presentation, I'll let you know that if you can master those feelings of fear, failure, and embarrassment, that you will become a leader amongst your peers a lot faster than I did. But first, let's go way back to when I was a child growing up here in Atlanta. I wanted to be the next Monica Kaufman Pearson. She had made history becoming the first Black female anchor at a news station. And I practice my news stories in the mirror all the time. I got in every play that I could get in, and I wrote my heart out, hoping that when that knock came to the door, I would be there to answer. And thankfully, that preparation paid off. While still in college, I landed a one-year training program at WSB-TV. And on my first day, I was over the moon. And for my first assignment, they asked me to call my idol, Monica, at home. Well, she wasn't too impressed and did not appreciate me invading her personal time to remind her what time she needed to be at work. In fact, she told me how much of a professional she was and slammed down the phone before I could say, I'm sorry. I went from the highest high to the lowest low in just one day. And in fact, I thought my career was over. But Monica Kaufman, being the great human that she is, she came and found me in the station that evening, and she apologized. But she gave me some advice that I immediately took to heart. She told me if I wanted to be in the news business, that I better get a tough skin. And she was right. She knew that I was going to face giant egos, and I was going to be dismissed very quickly. And there were days that I wished that she had dragged me out of the building. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered her great gesture. And here I am decades later, standing before you, so grateful to the lessons that she taught me. One being that the woman you are at work shouldn't be that different than the woman you are anyplace else. If you're a good person, be a good person everywhere you are. There are times when I look back on my career where I did not like the person I was and the job that I was. The job made me show up in places different than how I knew myself to be. And when it happened to me, eventually I learned to change the job, not me. And that's my first life lesson that I want to share with you. A job is not who you are, it's what you do. When it changes who you are, it's time to change what you do. So, when I took that advice and settled in, I was really ready to move on. And in that particular job, I had to realize, fortunately, that being there at WSB, after the first year, it turned into 4 years, and I eventually hit a ceiling. I had to leave. I was scared to leave, and my mother realized it because I started to get these job offers, and I wouldn't take them. And so she gave me something that I didn't even know I needed. I didn't know I could have it. She gave me permission to fail. In fact, she told me that failing would be good for me because it would teach me what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. With her advice, I went on and I landed a job in Birmingham, Alabama, in the newsroom, and it was a good job. I enjoyed it right up until the unfortunate and sad murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman. And coverage of the O.J. trial and that whole saga really changed journalism in a way that it still hasn't recovered from. All of a sudden, journalists were able to insert themselves in the news, tell us their political landings or leanings, editorialize. And it changed the business so profoundly that I became disillusioned, and I decided to leave the news business. When I left, I took on a job that was far beyond my depth, and I failed gloriously. But let me tell you, failing at work isn't who you are. It's just a step, an inevitable step, on an ambitious person's journey. Think about it. Would you want to watch a movie where the main character got everything right the first time and had absolutely, no barriers? It would be a boring movie. And my life certainly wasn't boring. It's been a lot of steps, a lot of interesting steps. But that also led me to eventually get back into television after that fiasco. I did go back to television, but this time into public affairs. And I landed my first big job. I was the assistant director of public affairs. And I was still relatively young because I had, started when I was in college. And so going into my first meeting, I was determined to let them know that I was supposed to be in the room. And it wasn't shortly after that meeting that my boss came to me and she said, you don't have to say anything in every meeting. But if you do, please make sure you say something additive. Ouch. It stung. But it was necessary. It made me a much more invested listener and a very strategic communicator. Along with that advice came some really hard lessons. And I had to learn that sometimes fairness is just not expected. You shouldn't just always expect that things are going to be fair. In fact, one incident comes to mind. I was in a job where I was being bullied, and when I got the courage to go to HR to let them know about it, because the woman who was bullying me was about to become my manager. So I went into HR, I pleaded my case, I told the HR director what was going on. I pleaded to be put on someone else's team. And he sat across his desk and he looked at me. And he got up and he leaned over his desk and he said right to me, "Your name ain't Becky." I was stunned. He went further to say that Black people have kicked down this door so that you can have the position that you have. He got up, he's encouraging me to go out the door. He said, "I need you to be the strong Black woman you are and get back to work." That one really hurt. And it taught me that fairness, again, wasn't always something that you can expect, and that I may not get the same grace as my white counterparts. And I know that there are people who look like me who are still learning that lesson all the time. But what that did teach me was resilience. And I certainly had resilience on my mind in this next lesson when I had the opportunity to work with a financial guru, Susie Orman. Susie Orman was in Atlanta working on her latest PBS special, and I was a producer at the time. And so I worked with Susie that night. She watched me produce and manage the entire live crew. I produced the breaks from the floor, and I stood next to her as talent that evening, proud of myself. At the end of the evening, she leaned over to me and she said, "They won't know your worth until you know your worth. If you were a man, they wouldn't expect you to do everything." I had to learn to say no, delegate, and self-advocate. And that brings me to lesson number 2. No matter what path you choose, you will face hardships. Some of them will even test your resolve. I encourage you to take the criticism if it's constructive, but please don't lose your sense of self. Your power will come by the decisions that you make. People will trust you by those decisions and the things that you do. Your detractors will be won over not by perfection, but by persistence. And I'm really talking to women when I talk about this, because as women, we do try to be perfect. In fact, when we look at a job description, we disqualify ourselves if we don't have every single skill in the job description. On the other hand, men, they qualify themselves if they have 2 or 3 of them. Sorry, guys. But really, ladies, we won't get what we want unless we learn to advocate for ourselves and to speak up and ask for it. When I was leaving that job, a friend gave me, and I tried to find it today, a clown pen. And I was kind of offended by it. Like, what does she mean by this? And she told me, she was like, look, don't ever take yourself too seriously. Okay. But I did find that there was one job where I could not take myself too seriously, and that was being a mom. When my boys were young, and they're here today, they thought that my job was going to meetings. On the other hand, their dad, who was a photojournalist and an editor, they thought that his job was telling stories to the world. And I realized that I was working so hard at being perfect in my day job that I was missing out on the important things that are required from being a mom. Luckily for me, I had another mentor who gave me some good mom advice. She said, as a working mother, you have to be committed to putting no more than 3 tasks on your to-do list every day. And you need to ask your sons what things you absolutely have to show up for. Once I did that, I had the balance that I needed as a leader, and I was able to step into that. And that brings me to lesson number 3. Ladies, no one asked us to be superwoman. We can have it all, but we can't do it all. After that, I'm going to my next role, right? And I'm searching. There were many times when I was recruited. Sometimes I had to do a job search. This one particular time, I'll never forget it. I had 3 jobs on the table. One was to become a marketing director for a national nonprofit. One was to go back into public affairs for a local nonprofit. And the third one was to become a CEO of a statewide nonprofit that served women in STEM. I didn't know which one to take until I had a conversation with my 7-year-old son. He reminded me of a lesson he learned in video games. He said, the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. And then he asked me something that has stayed with me to this day. He said, Mom, which one works for your life plan? A life plan? I was embarrassed to tell him I didn't have a life plan. But later that night, I decided to take the riskier CEO position. And luckily for him, it paid off. So my 4th lesson comes from my precocious son, and it is, get yourself a life plan. For me, I reset my life plan every year. I think about the things that I want to accomplish, and I put real things on it, like get yourself a trainer, exercise 3 times a week, no matter where you are in the world. Or work things like learn a new skill, or commit to putting your phone down, face down, when you're in a face-to-face meeting. I have learned that without a plan, my failures are a lot less instructive. And a lot of times that meant I went into rooms where I was the youngest person in the room, and intimidated by that, I had to learn to let my work stand for itself. But when I took on that CEO job, there was still so much more learning to do. I had to learn to look the part, act the part, and do the work. Acting the part was really harder than it seems because it required acting, not good acting. But I did have a sponsor, and notice I said sponsor, not mentor, give me some more advice. He said, Monica, you have earned the right to be in the room. Step into your executive presence. Stop leading from behind. It was really good advice, and it takes me to lesson number 5. That little voice inside of your head that's telling you you can't do it, it's lying to you. Don't trust it. Trust that thing in you that has gotten you to where you are, not that voice that's telling you that you've gone too far. If you know yourself, trust yourself, take care of yourself, believe in yourself, then you will be the person that you want to be. These 5 lessons have gotten me on this stage today and into the most rewarding job I've ever had in my life. As the executive director of the Nature Conservancy, I literally get to wake up every morning and do global conservation that touches down around the world and build incredible partnerships. But the most joy I get is building tomorrow's leaders. In this role, I get to create the work environment that I always wanted for myself. One where mistakes are met with kindness, failure is met with growth, and people are encouraged to come to work every day in being their full self. No matter what their passion is, they're supported. You ask me, so what? What do I want you to really take from today? The world is changing in such a way. It's going in a direction that's not necessarily the best direction. If you want it to be the kind of world that you want to inherit and steward, I encourage you to lean into your life lessons. Every twist, every turn, go with it. And learn to embrace fear, failure, and embarrassment. Laugh at yourself and keep your values. And if Monica Kaufman ever gives you some advice, take it. Thank you.